This is Beyond Perception, where it's all about breaking out of limited perception and waking up to our inherent creative genius, our human potential, our true self. I am Simon Rilling, and today I have the true honor to speak to Mpilo Nkambule. Born in Swaziland, he grew up in two worlds, rural subsistence farming and urban. Professionally, he studied law and became an attorney to first practice law in Africa and now in Salt Lake City, US. Personally, years ago, he got inspired to go beyond the laws of man to also study spiritual laws, the laws that govern our reality. He's deeply passionate about enlightenment. He also studied different wisdom traditions and now shares his voice, wisdom, and love for service to mankind through his podcast Blossom of Thought with the World. Welcome, Mpilo.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Simon, for having me in your show. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. And when I was preparing for this conversation, I was really curious because from what I know, you are born in Swaziland and you grew up in a rural environment. And from what I understood also, where you live basically from your own produce. And I imagine that's very different to what most in the Western world know about or are familiar with. And I would love to invite you to share a bit how it was growing up in that environment, and then also how and why did you decide to study law?
Interesting two questions. Well, let me deal with my growing up. Born in, I will say I was born in South Africa to Swazi parents. And when I was still a baby, we went back to Swaziland and I grew up there. So my life, I usually say I lived in two worlds, or I've lived in two worlds. That is living in a rural area where there is subsistence farming and then living in the city life. So it's kind of like going back and forth. So I had some years in the rural areas, when you live in the city or in the town, your parents, they say, oh, go and stay with granny. And then you go to school there in the farm. And you live the way the farm life is about. And what you do there, as I've said, that you live on subsistence farming, which is, you make your own food. You are exposed to nature, the forest, the wilderness. You go out there, just like what you will read in ancient literature, such as the Bible, where you have the shepherds going out into the fields. Well, we never went out for days like they used to do in this ancient world. So we'll just go out in the morning, like 8 or 7:30. You drive the cattle out to the grazing fields, and then you come back at 10:30 for milking. So because that's part of our food, the milk will become part of our food. So you do the milking, and then you take them back, you go back to the field. Around about 1, you will just leave them in a camp somewhere there in the grazing fields and come back to eat, and then go out into the mountains, just the normal shepherding life. And the other thing is we will cultivate crops. There is a famous crop in Africa, or in Southern Africa, as far as I know, and at least in Swaziland. It's called maize. In the Western world, it's called corn. Mm-hmm. So that's the main, or that's what we call stable food. And we will live out of that throughout the course of the year. We start farming, cultivating the fields around September, October. And towards the end of December, you have your fresh corn. March, April, that's where you are harvesting and you're putting it in a crib and it's just exposed to the elements and it dries up. After drying up, you take the grain off the heads of grain, and then you put the grain into some kind of a reservoir, a tank, where you will store it and use it throughout the course of the year while you're going through the same cycle of what is called the law of the farm, where you go back again to do the farming when the farming season comes. So the farming season has always been around September, October. But it's not only maize, you've got all kinds of vegetables, peas, and you also have a family garden where you have all kinds of vegetables again, and also an orchard in the home. You've got papaya, banana, you've got mangoes. They form part of the orchard. Apart from the fruits that you get in the wilderness, out there in the forest, as you get out there, your guavas and many other fruits that I cannot mention or remember now, but I still have a vivid memory about. So it was more of an enriching life. When you are a boy, there's already been an introduction of what is called TV from the West. So you aspire to go back to the city life and be watching TV and be entertained. You don't realize that you are moving from pure life and so close to nature, so close in terms of that you can go out in the forest and just be there and be close to nature and be really feeling great. So close to nature in the sense that you eat food from the wilderness naturally, that has not been tempered by any capitalist or industrial person trying to make profits and water down the natural fruit or vegetable. So that's how I like to think of that life, as a life where one was living close to nature. And it was a great life when one looks back, and reminisces about such days. It was tough because you really have to work hard. Working hard, that means, when you're living that farm life, you also have to take the kekli to the dipping tank for cleansing, ticks of the cows or the kekli and all that kind of life. Sometimes you have to do that or go into the field early in the morning, like 4 a.m. before you go to school. So when you go to school already somewhat exhausted. But I don't remember that in class I was exhausted. I don't know if I was not that conscious of the fact that I'm exhausted. I'm not able to concentrate. But that's the kind of life that we had to live. It was beautiful, but we did not realize that it was beautiful because we were aspiring for this new industrial world that was happening in the city. I don't know if that makes sense, Simon.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And what I was wondering, I've been to South Africa. I've not been to Swaziland. How's the educational system there? Is it like, does everybody goes to school? Does everybody has the opportunity to study, or like, how was your how, how was it for you to, first of all, like, why did you decide to study law? Like, you told a bit of the environment you grew up, and how did you make the transition to study law and then also later on?
Well, to answer the first question, you mentioned if people have an opportunity to go to school. There's a huge opportunity. A lot of the schools are government schools, very few private schools, because the government schools, they are cheap. They are cheaper than the private schools. So a lot of people get the opportunity to go to school. In recent years, there's been an introduction of what is called free primary education. And that was sponsored by the European Union, as far as I remember. So it is in the constitution. It was incorporated in there. But obviously, government may incorporate things in the constitution and not be able to do everything because it's based on the government purse. So there was motivation from political organizations and the European Union, and the European Union was very handy in sponsoring that. So that program started, and everybody can go to school now and get education, at least for their primary education. High school, then they have to take care of that. Also at university level, college, government too comes in to subsidize, or I would say give you scholarship, full scholarship to learn locally. And there are sources that also go abroad that the government pays for. So that's how we get our education. I didn't go through the free primary education. That was way after I was done with school myself. I think I was at university. So how did I decide law? Well, uh, it wasn't when I was at high school. Here is something, Simon. One thing that I've discovered that happens all over the world is that we just go through school, we don't know what we're doing. And we get the motivation from our parents that if you work hard, you see, you'll get to university, and from university you'll get a good job, so you need to go to school. So everybody else is going to school without having that mindset from early or from childhood that, oh well, I want to be a lawyer. You may say, oh well, I want to be a police officer, or I want to be a fireman, like Snoop Doggy Dogg used to have a song that begins with some kids saying, I want to be a fireman, I want to be the officer. We are just saying what we are seeing. It's not that we are really convicted that we want to do that. Well, when it comes to me, I was also in the same terrain where I wasn't sure. I was just going to school, finished high school, and I was involved in NGO and charity activities, which took me to South Africa, and I lived there for 2 years. And that's when I realized that in that process, I kind of like became deeper aware of spiritual matters and activities and living a life of contribution, of service. And I was like, well, for some time, I've been studying here and awakening to spiritual laws. When I go back to Swaziland, when I got back to Swaziland, I decided, okay, let me study the laws of men, since I've been involved in kind of like studying.
That was afterwards that you decided to study law.
Yes, after high school, and I decided to study law after coming back from South Africa. I was involved in NGO activity and charity work.
If I may ask you, now that you mentioned it, so in South Africa, was there a special moment, a special situation which intrigued you to start studying or to open awareness for spirituality, or however you want to describe it? Was there a situation, a moment?
Excuse me. Yes, that's a very good question, Shimon. In South Africa, I don't know if you said you've been to South Africa. There's a big city they call Johannesburg. Mm-hmm. So I was about South Johannesburg, 70 kilometers south of Johannesburg, in a certain location there. And I was with a friend of mine who was from the US. So we were doing service in a local community library. Mm-hmm. So we're packing, arranging books. People bring back books. We have to try and locate the aisle where they're supposed to be placed back, and just organizing and doing that kind of work in the library. So when I was doing that, you're looking at the book, and then you look at the number and then place it there. And all of a sudden, my eyes were caught by this particular book. And its title is First Things First. That was intriguing to me. That sounds tautologous. First things first, that sounds confused. Let me just take it out. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I opened the first page just to read what is being said. That attracted me. I was like, this is beautiful. It's speaking about, the laws of life, principle that life is governed by laws. And that's characteristic of Stephen R. Covey, the author of that book. I think he's mostly known for one of his bestsellers, or if not the number one book that has gone around the world, called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But this one was First Things First. So it took me, I was drawn into it, and it drawn into me. And I think the library, when I talked to them about the book, I think that they might have borrowed it to me, if I remember very well. I think they did borrow it to me. But I returned it and later on got my own copy that I started studying, reading slowly, trying to grasp this thing that was so appealing to me, where Stephen Covey speaks about the laws of life, the laws of nature, and how they are unchanging and unchangeable. And from there, I started reading other books, motivational books. And usually you will find that some authors like Stephen R. Covey too, at the end of the book, he will list what he termed wisdom literature.
Mhm.
And some of the literature will find that it will be quoted inside the content of the book. And every time I find a great quote, I will trace it and go to the back or the bibliography or the footnote or endnote and look at who is the writer of such a thought, who is this great thinker. So from there, I will be able to trace other books. I will go to find Plato's Republic, just an organization of Socrates' thinking and his teachings in the streets of ancient Greece. So I will read about Aristotle, Plato, I will read about Socrates, and I'll also go and find the Nicomachean Ethics of Aristotle, and find these great thinkers in various books too, as I will read. And that took me to the East, where I will have to follow books such as the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, by a mystic in ancient India, and then going far east still to China, where you find people like who is this great magistrate and leader in China, Confucius. You find people like Confucius and the great things that they taught. So I developed that love for the ancient writers because there was no competition there of trying, to make money, writing to make money. It was just pure teaching, people sharing, speaking from their heart, what they were experiencing and what they were thinking. And they were more given to virtue and them living this high moral life and teaching that they found that they were one with the universe or with the laws of the universe. So that thrilled me that there is that kind of a life, something that I wasn't aware of. So I started following and all other books. One of my favorite one is James Allen. Um, um, what's the title of the book? It's called As a Man Thinketh in His Heart, So Is He. And he has written many other books, which I've read too. And some years after that, there was a couple that came from the US that came to Swaziland, and I met them, and they discovered that I was thrilled about Stephen R. Covey, and they got me some few books from Stephen R. Covey that I wasn't aware of, like uh, Spiritual Roots of Human Relations, The Divine Center, and many others. So at some point, one of their son, his name is Bob Barnes, he's my friend, he's here. He's just 31 hours away from where I am.
Wow. Yeah.
He's in Provo, near the university that I went to here. So he came down to Swaziland to pick his parents. And his parents introduced him to me, and they told him that I like Stephen R. Covey. And he said, "Oh, well, Stephen R. Covey, I was with him the other day, so I occasionally meet him." So when he got back to the US, he connected me with the Covey family because they are writers. The sons, they're also writers, they're business people. So they collected a number of books, sent them as a package down to Swaziland for me. So I've been, I would say, blessed and spoiled by them, and I had to read and share with friends, and that led me to many other books that are inspiring. Yeah, I don't know if what I've been saying it makes sense to you, Simon.
Absolutely. It's super, super fascinating and interesting. What I'm curious, because you've been studying all these great thinkers, philosophers, and also from the East and the West. And what I'm curious, first of all, how did all those reading help shape your worldview or even understanding of the world? How, how did your perspective on life change through being exposed to this wisdom, to these teachings?
I think the important thing is when you learn and practice what you learn, that's what has power. That's what changes your perception. That's what empowers you, because You don't get empowered by just having light coming into you. It's when you act upon the light that you get empowered. And when you get empowered, you live in this ecosystem where you connect with other people. You are a social being, as the sociologists teach us. So you get to affect others. Others, they hear that your language has changed, or they will hear your language and they want to listen. And that's when you realize that other people get impacted by you being impacted by what you have chosen to do. So reading such books and literature, wisdom literature, I like to call it, as Stephen Covey would, it started developing a certain perception in my mind. The very same world that I have always lived in started to appear differently. I started to view human beings differently, life differently, get motivated to do things differently, and start having.
Well, I'm curious. What did you think about humans before, and what are you thinking about humans now? If you say that your perception about humans changed.
Oh, well, boy, I wish I didn't say that. Now you're asking me this difficult question, but let me deal with that. When you live, you're just looking at other human beings. These are your brothers and sisters in the home. It's just that. And when you go out and play with friends, you're just playing soccer. If you are given exercise like me, I've always played soccer. You're just viewing them. You never think of the God in them. You never think of human potential. You never think of that even the person that we can look down upon down the street, or the person who seemed to be struggling in class, when you're in class, maybe you're doing better, you have that belief that somehow continuing the right direction and working hard, they will be able to achieve something greater than we can see now. So you are not able to determine or limit a person's ability to do and achieve to what you can think now. People have done miraculous things, even those that appear to be underdogs. They end up becoming great people. So with the reading of such literature, you realize that everything is governed by law. Mankind is governed by law. Emerson will say this. He says, let him learn a prudence of a higher strain. Let him learn that everything in nature, even dust and feathers, go by law and not by luck. What he sows, he reaps. So that understanding suggests clearly that everything is governed by law. We can no longer think of people or do what philosophers call I'm forgetting the first word, but Aristotle called them negations. Uh, Negations are statements that suggest that, oh, you'll never become anything. Oh, stop trying to play that music or piano or guitar. You'll never become a great guitarist or a pianist. Or stop trying this thing of podcasting. That thing is for Joe Rogan and others. Stop doing it. While you say you are concluding that the person will never be. That's a negation. So Aristotle said the negations are difficult to defend because, we are living in a life that is governed by law. So if it's governed by law, every person who obeys the law, they get the result. It doesn't matter. The laws are no respecter of persons. So reading out of good books, it gives you that perspective and that reverence for mankind too. Because as you read more, it affirms you, it affirms others. You tend to respect them. You learn to allow them to be. You know how in life we are so controlling. We want people to behave like us. That's one definition of selfishness. We want them to see the world as we see it. If they don't see it, we are angry. So when you read more of the spiritual writings and wisdom literature, it allows you see more space for yourself, and then also by necessary implication, you give others space too. You let them be. Just like I think the ancient teachers will say, live and let live. which is a very difficult thing. We are so controlling. I can be angry with my brother because he didn't behave the way I expected them to. You know, we like to blame people whenever things go wrong. You know, we don't want to take responsibility. We want to force other people to grow or to do things in a certain way. We hardly focus on ourselves. You know, somebody said that the greatest battles of our lives are fought within the silent chambers of our hearts. So the ancient teachers will say, I think it's Socrates, that an unexamined life is not a life worth living. So it requires us to reflect, go within ourselves and watch ourselves and deal with ourselves. And really, when we have won a great battle is when we have dealt with ourselves in a way that we grow, we change, we become better and become so sweet to others, become kind. Kindness always draws people to you.
That's wonderful. And now that I have someone who studied both, I'm also curious. Would you say that Western thinkers and Eastern thinkers, they are teaching the same? Is it is everybody's teaching the same, or are there differences in the teachings if you compare the like West to East? What did stack you, or what did you know, or is it just depending on where you are and your own awareness that one might resonate more easily, but it's ultimately the same, or are there differences?
I would say for the longest time, the East was known for contemplation, was known for what we call today mindfulness, meditation. The West seems, that is in recent decades, the West seemingly the focus was more, you know, when you industrialize, it's more getting out there and working hard and building empires and all stuff like that. The wisdom of the East was more of meditation and turning within in order to, it was more of the heart, the soul, consciousness, conscious awareness, or turning within and being reflective. The East was, I mean, the West is more of studying books, concept, science, and all stuff like that. But in recent years, again, I would say we have kind of like become one. It seems like there is huge restoration of things where the ancient traditions are coming up. You know, when you follow the traditions, for instance, somebody once observed, I was listening to a talk some time ago. He said, when you go to the English and ask them, where did you get your civilization? They point to the Romans. When you go to the Romans, you ask them, where do you get your civilization? They pointed to the Greeks. And when you go to the Greeks, they take it to Egypt. And I think you and I are aware of what Egypt has in this whole history of the race in producing seemingly some treasures. You know, Bertrand Russell, is it Bertrand Russell? I think he wrote Western Civilization or something like that. He was an English mathematician and philosopher. And in it, I read that he was saying, oh boy, I've lost track of my thought here. But he was basically talking about two worlds in in the ancient world. There was Egypt, there was Babylon. Those two nations had two constitutions that were opposed to each other. Egypt was known for spirituality, people thinking that people were living in such a way that they orderly in their lives, they live according to the moral laws because they will be accountable in the next life. While Babylon, on the other hand, their constitution was more of based on material things. You know, let us build cities, let us make more money. No, not just build cities, because everybody was building cities way back then. There were city states. Let us be focusing on making money, so material things. So these were two contrasting or polarized worlds anciently. And as we follow the tradition, you realize that when you talk about the East, you talk about the West, other people ask, East from where? and others may ask, West from where? Suggesting that we go back to Egypt in Africa, where there is the richness of the civilization of our race. I'm sure there can be many arguments surrounding that, but that's some of the arguments that you get. So I would say, answering your question and just being repetitors too, is that the East is known for, so much concentration on the moral laws. Not that Aristotle, Plato, the ancient Greeks were not. They did teach moral laws. They were given to virtue, like the Stoics. They believed that the highest good was virtue. So what we realize is that there was a forgetting of the Eastern wisdom, and there was so much hype about Western wisdom or Western writings or thinking or thought. And the science and all these developments and the so-called civilization. So the focus and the, how we have the media that is broadcasting things all over. We have the English, you follow the English, you follow the establishment of the US and all stuff like that. So the West, the focus is more of the West, while we were leaving this important thing of mindfulness, cosmic consciousness, which is not something new that is suddenly coming up now, but is something that has always been there. The ancient teachers were talking about such things, and their students were taught the same thing, and they carried, the tradition down to the present day. So suddenly we are having a world uniting or a restoration of ancient teaching. Some of the things that we may not be aware from written books, but they're suddenly coming up because people are researching ancient wisdom, are researching ancient lifestyle, and they are discovering books that were hidden, libraries from all over the world where the ancient lived and organized and wrote and put things in some jars and buried them. And they are coming up and they are teaching us about how our forefathers thought, how they lived, and what were their aspirations, what did they look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're a lawyer. You studied law, and you also mentioned that you were introduced to moral law, spiritual law, and I think another term also for these teachings is Hermetic Teachings. Could you explain for those listening and have no clue what those laws are, what they are?
I've been speaking about Egypt for the past few minutes. The tradition suggests that there was a great teacher called Hermes Trismegistus. It is from him that we have teachings referred to as Hematic Teachings. Others even suggest that Abraham got his wisdom, his great understanding from him. Those are some of the traditions that we hear as we read some of these books. So the Hematic Teachings are famously recorded in a book called the Kabbalion. That book speaks about 7 laws of the universe. We've got the law of cause and effect, the law of polarity, the law of mind, the law of gender, the law of rhythm, the law of vibration, the law of, I'm forgetting the 7th one. So those are the laws that are covered in the Kabbalion as great teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, who was referred as the thrice great, the greatest great. When you hear such words, you do not oppose because of the literature that you find or the great wisdom that is collected in the Kabbalion. So that's some of the stuff that I've been following over the years, or reading, studying, going back again. Life gets busy. You are stretched everywhere as an attorney, do all these things. Sometimes these things start evaporating out of your mind. And then sometimes life hits you in a certain way. You go back to reread and reconsider such thoughts, and they motivate you. For instance, one of the laws there is the law of rhythm. And the rhythm speaks about the swing of the pendulum. You know, the pendulum, if it's still, it's just stand still, just on the center. But when it swings, going one direction, the distance it takes to the right, that it will take to the left when it comes back. So what that suggests is that, you know, that's a law that is governing all things in life. It governs us. There are times where you wake up, you feel so pumped up and excited. So you are on the right of the swing of the pendulum to some degree, as others we want to analyze. Or you are at the center, because others suggest that you want to be at the center, you know, of the pendulum and not be swing by and not be too excited or be depressed on the other end or miserable. So when you wake up excited, you you perform at a high level. You know, you are so positive about life, and you seem to attract and to be at ease with life, and life seems to be happening for you. But some days you wake up, you feel so low and not motivated. What this suggests is that as human beings, unlike animals, we have what we call the independent will, the power of the will. So when the pendulum has swung you to the left, where you wake up, you know, with some mood swing, you're feeling down, you exercise the will and choose your mood, and not based on how you woke up feeling. You know, it's easy to start your day so that terribly and ruin everything going forward, whether you are in business with other people or you're going to work, because you started on the negative vibe. You can, you know, disturb the entire day, and you will have a terrible day and cause others to have a terrible day too. But because of the power of the will which we have been endowed with, unlike animals or trees, we are able to use your rationality and say, I'm feeling this way and I don't like feeling this way. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to switch on some beautiful music and go to the shower and dance while taking shower. That changes the vibes within, the vibe within. And you know, when you are feeling low, it's when you are vibrating at a very low level. And then when you put something that motivates you, picks you up, it's really picking you up, you start vibrating at a higher level. And the more you work on that, by exercise of the will, you are going up and you begin to feel better. Or you decide to focus on something that is good, that makes you think good. You focus your thoughts on good things, even though you're not feeling well. That vibe changes. Or you go out to friends that are excited, they're having fun. It changes your vibe within. So that shows that we have power to decide how we feel, even though circumstances may whip on us and make us feel bad, but we can rise. As difficult that is, it does not mean that the fact that we have that power, we use it. Most of the time we're ignorant of it, or we have difficulty using it because sometimes we give up early because it's difficult. We are not used to that. We have not been taught that way. Only when you study the books and find out that, oh, human beings have got 4 human endowments: independent will, conscience, creative imagination, self-awareness. And self-awareness is so great because that's the one where you come out of yourself and say, oh boy, I'm feeling this way. An animal doesn't do that. Oh boy, this is bad of me. I shouldn't be thinking this way or saying these words. A dog, when it sees you coming into the neighborhood or coming into my compound, it just, and then it runs for you. You see, it doesn't come out and say, oh boy, that looks like my Mpilo's friend. Let me not do this. It acts instinctively, not based on independent will or self-awareness. So that's the beautiful thing with the laws. When you understand them, you work with them. Because when you are ignorant, because most of the time we are ignorant of them, they just work on us. And you know, sometimes we're so depressed because we don't understand what's going on. Everything is governed by law. Once you understand that I'm feeling this way, what's the polar opposite? So that takes us to the law of polarity. What's the polar opposite of this kind of feeling? The polar opposite of fear, you may say it's love. If you read in the Bible, Paul says God is not giving us the spirit of fear, but the spirit of love, which means you want to go to the opposite of fear. Or another word you can say, the opposite of fear, courage. So if you understand that the world is polarized, we live in a world governed by the law of polarity. When you feel this way, you know that you need to go to the opposite side. And now you learn how to take steps away from this polar that is making you not productive or not feeling good. And then you head the direction where you will pick yourself up in the same way that if you're feeling down, by use of your will, you start playing music that will pick you up, because you know that the opposite of this feeling is this great feeling, and then you start working on that. I've covered a little bit of the laws that are referred to as the Hematic Teachings, which are universal laws. In fact, they are not created by anyone. Because here's the other thing. Wisdom is not based on it's not like geopolitics. It's not like based on, oh, the powerful people are found in England or Great Britain, or the great thinkers are found in China. Wisdom is, and knowledge is widely spread. Those are knowledge. It's a law. The way I like to think of it. Any person who wants to have knowledge, the road is the same. You have to obey the laws governing knowledge. So knowledge is evenly present 100% everywhere in the world. I don't need to come to Sweden or Switzerland, where you are, in order for me to get some really good education. It's all about knowing the right sources. I can be educated where I am and be one of the finest thinkers. I don't need to travel around. But we have been brought up to think that in order to have better education, we need to travel somewhere there's better education. Some people are more organized in organizing the literature that has to be studied in order to produce a certain professional. Others, they've got systems that are not properly organized or not having the best tutors. Because it's important also to have a tutor that is really good at understand what they're teaching. So I think that much I can say about the laws of life, as you have asked me the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that I stumbled upon those laws this year,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very, very helpful to make even more sense of this reality. And one of the things, because you also mentioned it, you talked about morality, and you also connected it to, I think, when you talked about Egypt, that they were practicing a moral law because they thought, or they thought about being accountable for their actions, possibly in an afterlife or next life. Could you explain what is moral living? What is morality? How are there, like, is there something which is right and something which is not right? Like, when can I say I'm acting moral? and then also someone who might listen to this and like, I don't mind. I just do what's good for me, and I don't really care about morality. I don't believe in it.
That's an interesting question, because now you are inviting me to go deep into philosophy. Why?
Uh-huh.
I don't think I'm that tough or that wise to, to analyze things that deeper. But I will say, in my experience, judgment, there is something called morality. Martin Luther King is accredited with words like this: the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And to me, right there, he's speaking about the moral law of the universe. And then he's also speaking about justice. And those go together. James Allen, the one that I mentioned earlier on, he speaks about the universe that it knows no injustice. All it knows is justice. And we
What would you say is, apologies, what would you say is justice?
well, before I go there, I will get there.
Okay.
I want to deal with the morality thing, because I think anybody listening will feel like, oh well, he hasn't said much. He's just quoting the thinkers that he has been exposed to. Here is an example that will make us think a little bit about this, whether there is what is moral and what is not moral, whether somebody can say, no, I just live my life, I don't care about morality. An example that is given is so simple. In fact, I was reading C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you know him. He was an Englishman who was atheist and then converted to Christianity.
I just posted something 20 minutes before we talked.
Yeah.
A quote of him. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great Lewis, the quotable Lewis. Yeah. So he gives this analogy, which I like that's the name of the book. Oh, well, I'm forgetting the name of the book. Or it's called Mere Christianity. He's addressing this issue of morality where people want to debate and say, hey, what is moral to me is not moral, or what is moral to you is not moral to me. That's the normal argument. He says, when I peel my apple, I mean my orange, and share with you, I'm just paraphrasing the thought, and I share it with you, or you share with me your orange, and then tomorrow I'm having my apple and you are asking me to share and I don't share, what are you likely mostly to say? You will say, hey, but I shared with you yesterday my orange. I expect that you'll do the same. You see, that example of orange and apple as sharing, can be amplified in a lot of matters in life. If you do something for me, you expect that in return I'll do something for you. What is that based on? Another example is we are in an auditorium. Simon comes in and then he's a great speaker there. And while he's speaking, you get off to the bathroom. And then a third person comes and finds an empty seat, sits there. When you come back, what will you say? The argument will be, hey, this is my seat. The person will say, hey, I found this seat open here, so you can't tell me it's your seat. And then the debate can go on forever. You will feel hard done by that because you were seated there, you came there first. So the argument goes on is about who is right among the two of us, because morality is about right and wrong. So there are so many occasions where we are forced to decide this is right as far as behavior is concerned, and this is wrong. So there are so many things that prove to us that there is right and wrong. There is behavior that is accorded as virtuous or upright or good, and then there is behavior that we shun. If you and I, you are selling me your earphones on credit, and then I don't pay you back, that's a contract, right? We enter into that contract. You give me the product first, and then you say I should pay at the end of the month. At the end of the month, I continue doing my podcasting with the earphones that I got from you. I'm not paying. Who's supposed to decide what's wrong and what's right? The laws, we don't need to read from a book. We may go to court. When we go to court, we are going to enforce laws that are based on morality. We say we are seeking for justice. We are seeking for the law to take its course. And the laws of men, to me, they seem to be arising or have been informed by the moral laws of the universe, which are no respecter of persons. They are operating with everyone. We may try and dark the vigilance of men, but the vigilance of the law you won't run away from because the laws will catch up with you. Thus, when you disobey the laws of the universe, the moral laws of the universe, you, in religious language, it says you are sinning. But in any other language or philosophical language, that's degeneracy. You are, going down. But when you work with the law, you are going up. You are becoming more bright. You are becoming more wise. You are becoming more virtuous. You are becoming more powerful, because the laws, they work with you as you work with them. Thomas Troward was from the UK, but he descended to Punjab, 1800s India, or early 1900s India. He wrote a book entitled, I think that was after he was a judge. He wrote a book entitled, I think it was on mental science. He says, Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science. Yeah. There he says, nature obeys us. Nature obeys us precisely in proportion as we first obey nature. So nature is not subject to what we want to do, our empty whims or ephemeral fancies. Nature will obey us as we obey its laws. It's not the other way around, that nature will just bow down to us and bend, towards us when we have not obeyed it. We must obey its laws, then it delivers to us. If we have to travel, do some space travel like Elon Musk is so motivated to do, you must study the laws of nature first on how to get into the end, shoot all the way up there. Not the other way around, that you will just, nature must then bend it to you. You decide how to travel anyhow without studying how nature works with its laws. I don't know if I've treated to your satisfaction the issue of morality, but now you have asked the question on justice. Somehow I ventured into it. I don't know whether you want the justice of the universe or the justice of man. But let me try on this issue too. The justice of the universe is bestly expressed by the law of cause and effect. As Emerson said, that let him learn a prudence of a higher strain. Let him learn that everything in nature, even dust and feathers, go by law and not by luck. What he sows, he reaps. In other words, what you put out in the universe, it gives back to you. If you are a person that is always angry, always fighting people, what happens? You'll be fought back, you'll be injured. That's what the universe is giving to you. It's justice. It's meting out to you what we have put out to it. So that's the universe. So, that's the justice of the universe. It just gives what you put out to it. If you are reckless in life, you get back recklessness. The greatest teacher of all time said, "He who lives with a sword shall die with a sword." He was expressing this very same law. What a man thinks he becomes. That's ancient wisdom. It has come alive in our life from our great writers or great thinkers of the ancient world, including Christ himself. So to me, that's justice, that everything is governed by law, and the laws they give to you, what you have put out there. And I'm trying to think of this other statement. The laws are no respecter of persons. They don't care who you are. As long as you obey them, they give back to you in terms of what you have done. If you decided to work out your body, work it out properly, and eat the right food, it's going to give it to you. You're going to be fit, healthy, and not be easily penetrated by a coronavirus or some flu of some kind, easily, and be knocked off unconsciously or anything. You'll find that very few things will affect you. Most of the time, you'll be healthy, a healthy person. Why? You are obeying the laws of biology. You are obeying the laws of eating. You are obeying the laws of your body or biology, as I've said. So when you obey the law, it gives to you nothing else but according to the law. Joseph Smith, in the Christian tradition, he says there is a law irrevocably decreed in heaven before the foundation of the earth, upon which every blessing is predicated. And when you obtain any blessing from God, it is by obedience to that law upon which it is predicated. So there is a law in the universe. If you want to think of it in terms of God, if you're a believer like me, that God created the universe and then he set things in terms of law, that if you obey this law and act in this way, at the end of it, there is this blessing that you will get. There is this reward. You are rewarded according to your efforts, according to your work. That's why studying, learning about life, about the laws of life, it opens up, it heightens your awareness and seeing opportunities, things that you can put together, that you can build in order to be able to get a result. So that's justice to me. When it comes to the laws of man, again, the justice of man seems to extrapolate or to build on the justice of the universe, because you are trying to convert from morality or the moral laws of life to create the laws of man. Whether the laws are the laws of contract, the one that I was referring to, that you and I, we agree, say we are striking a deal, you'll be selling me your earphones so that I can do my podcast. if I don't pay, you know, the people in the community will reflect inside and say, how do we feel about this? Is this right? We will say, no, it's wrong. What are we following? It's arising from conscience, arising from the inner law that we all carry around. The law of, the consciousness that tells us that this is wrong behavior. You can't take something from Simon and then don't return value to him in terms of your agreement. Then those are converted and they become the laws of man, you see. Even when it comes to the criminal law, where I break into your house and I take your thing without your consent, or even if I didn't break, you are facing that direction, I take your phone and I go away with it. We say as a community, that's wrong. Where are we going? Again, we're going back to morality, the right and wrong. So we define that, we put it in our statute or legislation and say somebody who steals or theft is a wrong that is being committed. So it's unlawful to even say. It's contrary to law. That's unjust. You're not supposed to do that. Hence, when we bring the criminal to court, we are saying we are trying to do that which is just, punish the offender, and then have a safe community. That's based, according to me, that's based on moral laws that comes from within. We have a social contract where we say this is wrong, this is right. And that social contract comes from within the way we feel about things. If I stab your brother with a knife, or you stab your brother with a knife, and others are watching, what happens? They are appalled or they are shocked. This is not good. And others want to jump, even if they are strangers. This is your brother. You can't say, this is my brother, don't touch me. It's a collective feeling, understanding that we must jump and grab Simon because he is committing a wrong. We can't witness this horrible sin. So that's why even in international level, there were people who were punished in what is called the Nuremberg trials after World War II. Hitler and those, the remnant of Hitler's madness, they were tried by the Western world for crimes that they had committed, which were not crimes when they committed them. You see, that's what makes it far interesting, that we are not punishing on laws that we had already made and we agreed as a nation, these are laws. It was based again on the moral law that you can't just go out there and start killing people, exterminating 6 million Jews just like that. You are we say you are violating their innate right to life, right to dignity. All those things had not been defined, and we are agreeable internationally that other nations can come together and punish others for committing sins against other clans or tribes or ethnic groups. So that's where you see again the issue of justice, that you have committed a wrong against the race, against the community, even though it was not written. We had not agreed that we will have this law, because what gives value to law, what gives it credence, is that we must first have the law and then punish people or regulate people on the basis of something that they know that we have published. That's what gives it legitimacy. So if it's not written, we have not Parliament has not come up with that law and say this is the way we're supposed to behave, then you have got no legal standing to say he was wrong. You must first make the law. But after World War II, the Nuremberg trial punished people on the basis of no law that have been made, but based on moral law. So they were seeking justice to be done to punish the offender who had offended the moral laws of the universe, killing other people and stuff like that. I don't know if that makes sense as far as justice is concerned.
Yeah, it is a very, very interesting topic. And from what I understand, man-made law derives from moral law, from spiritual law. But then and that might be something we can talk about in another conversation, because you could argue that how man-made laws then applied, it might not always be in line still with
I agree
moral law.
with you.
But maybe we can discuss this in another conversation, because I also want to be appreciative of your time. And one thing I wanted to ask you, because that's something I have witnessed myself with my wife. We've been 4 times in Africa, and it has been always such a beautiful experience. And both of us, of course, fascinated by the nature, wildlife, etc. But even more by the authenticity and maybe the open heartedness of almost everybody we met. And I felt like really being seen and welcome, and there was a connection I had not experienced and where I've been before. And it was almost like going to a school of humanness, or waking up from a disconnection, and even maybe a material programming. And there was even a few moments where it was just looking at the eyes of like very simple, humble people, and I had to cry almost, because it was like seeing the soul, or seeing the pureness. And it was like there was no mask in front of the other. But that was something I very, very different to Western world. I've been in Asia, and my wife is from Mexico. Like they are very open up, but it's different. And it felt like remembering something in myself even. And I want to ask you, like, have you witnessed something similar, like making the opposite transition, like from Africa to US, like and and I have seen also you were talking about Ubuntu, and that really struck me. And that I kind of, I would love you to share a bit
Yeah, yeah,
about that.
for sure. I would love to do that. Definitely, any person from the West experiences the same thing that you experience, the spirit of humanity. The ancient
Uh-huh.
Greeks, the Stoics speak of the spirit of humanity. And that's the core of the African culture. We are very open, we are welcoming to strangers. We When a stranger come, we elevate him. I will get off my bed, and they will use my bed. That's just how far we can go. I'm making an example where I can just take a mat and lie and sleep on the ground and have you sleep on bed if there's only one bed. So that's how we are so kind and nice to people or visitors. We want to give them even the treatment that we may treat each other that way as Africans, but when we're used to each other, we have constant way of treating each other. When a guest comes, we want to slaughter the freshest and the healthiest bullock for them, you know. But we won't do that for family because you do that once in a while. But for somebody who's a visitor who comes out of your continent or from your country, you treat them with that level of hospitality. Almost everyone who comes to Africa has the same experience. I've had people in my platform, in my podcast, Blossom of Thought, whom I've interviewed who have been to Africa. They attest to this one thing, that in Africa we live as a community, as a collective. We have this connection, support for each other, and we move in that way in almost all the affairs of our lives. Whereas the West is characterized by individuality, or the life is individualistic. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's from here, and she was talking about how the same thing, that she had a friend, and the friend, when they're going through difficulties as friends, somehow uh, uh, her parents were supportive, but his friend didn't receive the support, kind of like the disconnection. She was attesting to the same thing, that in the world is more individualistic. In Africa, I was telling her that when we hear that she is sick in her house, the people in the neighborhood, one by one, or in families, will go in there to see how they're doing, bring them something. Others will want to spend some days there taking care of the person. If the person is all by themselves, people will be coming and living in the house while the person is sick, or taking turns to help the person come back to full health and going back to full activity in life. That's how it is in Africa. When there is a funeral, the whole community comes out to go and bury this one person. The whole community. Here I'm in Salt Lake City. If there is a funeral here, all of West Salt Lake City, even Central and going to the east, you'll find that people will hear about that, will come in their numbers to bury one of their own. We feel it's a loss to the community. It's not a loss to the family, but to the community. So that's how we live. When we speak of the spirit of Ubuntu, that's just an expression of it. And in a philosophical language, we say, I am because you are. Because you are, therefore I am. Or I am because we are. Because we are, therefore I am. It means I'm the other you, to be more philosophical, and you are the other me. We are connected. As Adam Markham said, that uh, we can only fly when we embrace each other. Oh, no one goes his own way. You see, we can also say. So he says we can only fly when we embrace each other. You know, that's just life. You can't disconnect from other human beings. The classic example to teach this thing is, you have your nice sweater and a shirt just right behind the flowers, behind you, beautiful flowers. You have the microphone, you have your your machine, your laptop or desktop. You think about all those things, your shoes. Did you make all those things? No. You are saved by other people that you don't even know. You're reading from a book, you don't know who's the printer, you don't know who was the thinker. If the person did not write the book, just like the one who organized the Cabellion, he organized the writings of ancient teachers. You see, there's things they end up going around and they benefit us. There's just nothing that I merit by my own self. I always go with others. No one goes his own way in this world. No one goes alone. You are always with other people in terms of the services or what they've created which benefits you.
That's a wonderful message and the perfect closing. Is there something else you want to share? A message, maybe a project, and of course, I will also add all the details about you, your podcast, with the show notes so that the listeners can follow you and listen to your content. And if there's something else you want to share, this is your.
Well, I can
This is
close
your
this way. As I've already said, that no one goes his own way. What's the principle that we can extrapolate from that? Is the principle of service. Is the principle of living to contribute to life. I like to say that we need to focus more on giving. And when we feel unhappy or miserable, if we want to pick ourselves up, start focusing on doing something for others. And that's when our vibration will change. Go out there, even if you find the homeless and give $20 to them and they suddenly glow, that makes you feel good, isn't it? That's what life is all about. All the wise, the sage, the great teachers in life that we have on record have taught that we live for others. We don't live for ourselves. When they teach about the spirit of self-aggrandizement, it's caring for self so that you can be more capacitated to give, to better give. So I like to say, you know, I I get more so that I can do more and have more so that I may give more. It's all about working hard. In this universe, the law suggests that you can't get anything without giving first. That's the reverse of what we have been taught. Because in trueness of life, the law is that you have to give something. If you are trending, if your podcast is trending and people are excited and they are willing to sponsor that and you get more money, others are willing to book you to come and speak to their audience and pay you. You can't get all that without having put the effort. You have to work hard through resistance, learn how to do podcasting, buy, equipment and book guests to come to your podcast, sometimes do solo cast. It's all that you put in. And, when you look at it this way, you will easily agree. But we may think that in other times it doesn't work that way, whereas it works precisely that way. Other people say, oh, Simon is lucky. Whatever he touches, seems to turn bright. There's no luck. Simon works on the base of law. He contributes to life. He gives to others. In the 1800s, in closing, it's Bryant S. Hinckley says, service is the virtue that distinguishes the creator of all time, by which they will be remembered. It places a mark of nobility upon its disciples. So that's what we should be about. Serve, empower ourselves to serve others. And that's the good way to live.
Thank you very much, Mpilo. It has been really, really insightful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, sharing your Ubuntu with us all here, listeners. And as just mentioned before in the show notes, we share all the resources discussed and add your details so that people can follow you. And thank you for who you are, taking the time to be here and sharing your experience, your life with us. And here at Beyond Perception, it's all about empowering people to live self-determined, free and healthy lives. So your message resonates 100%.
Thank you. People can find me, as we have asked earlier on, and Blossom of Thought, not but Blossom of Thought. That's my podcast. And I also invite guests here, there. And it's geared towards, feeding the three dimensions of a human being: the mind, the body, the spirit. So that's so that we can live holistically and be in line with the laws of life, with nature, because we are part of nature. We are nature ourselves. So we must learn how to be competent and live, don't go against the current of life. So the guests that we bring are geared towards helping us develop our minds and be aware how to solve problems, how to deal with the body so that it can be healthy. The nutritionist, the psychologist, and all the other people, spiritual teachers. Those are the kind of people that we like to have in our platform, and executive people. So thank you for having me, Simon, here in your show. People can follow me in Blossom of Thought and on Facebook, Mpilo Nkambule. I think LinkedIn too.
Yes, we will add all the pages to the show notes, and everybody will get them. That's a promise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mpilo, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much, Simon.